Hello everyone! Today I'm bringing you a deck that I've been super excited about since Ixalan came out. And when it was kind of bad then, but with a ton of impressive additions from rivals, plus a couple swings of the Banhammer, I think Merfolk finally have what it takes to be a powerful standard deck. This deck relies heavily on creatures, so we play about a crapload of them. We'll start off in the 1-drop slot with a newcomer, Mist Cloaked Herald. This guy doesn't really look like too much, but he'll win you games, straight up. In the early game, he can get an extra few points of damage, not bad, but he doesn't raise a whole lot of worry from people. They'll pretty much just let him be for a bit. But by turn 3 or 4, when we've buffed him up with all our lords, he turns into a huge threat that your opponents need to take care of right away, or they're going to get blown out. Moving on, we have 4 copies of Kamina's Speaker. Obviously, he's a 1-mana 2-2. He's just a 1-mana 2-2. I know there are rare occasions that he's a 1-1, but come on, this deck plays 16 2-drops. If you don't have one of them to follow the speaker up, you're not keeping the hand anyway. There's nothing especially great about this card, but he's an above average body that also works with our Trouble synergy. Is there anything really that you could ask for? Now that's all for our 1-drops. I know this is a pretty aggressive deck, but Merfolk don't really have any more super good 1-drops. I've seen a few lists playing Jade Bearer, and I don't think that it's a bad creature at all. In certain situations in other decks, it's maybe better than Mistcloaked Herald. I mean, it does get value when it comes out, but after that, it doesn't do anything. If we can get the Herald to stick, it's just way better in the long run. This deck also plays a few different ways to protect our creatures, so if we have one with a bunch of counters on it or something, we don't have to worry about it leaving as much. 2-drops. Here's the problem. They printed so many good 2-drops for Merfolk that if we played all of them in playsets, there would be like 24 of them. Obviously, that's way too many, so you kinda have to end up picking the best few and running with those. In this case, I'm playing playsets of what I think are the best 4. Silvergale Adept, Merfolk Branchwalker, Deeproot Elite, and Merfolk Mistbinder. Nobody needed selling on Silvergill. We all knew it was so good. It's already seeing play in Modern, so it's obviously good enough for Standard. It's 2 mana for a decent body and a card. That's amazing in the early game when you're trying to set the board up. It's also not a terrible top deck later on when we don't mind playing 5 mana for it, and it helps us refuel our hands again. Merfolk Branchwalker does super similar things. The deck only plays 22 lands, so if the Explorer gets a land, that's usually not bad, we don't mind that at all. If it finds a spell, it doesn't go into our hand right away like with Silvergill, but it makes a bigger body, and it gives us the option of sending it away if it's not what we want. It's just good value, that's all there is to it. Next up, surprising absolutely nobody, we have 4 copies of Merfolk Mistbinder. There's just nothing bad about this. A 2-mana 2-2 is good, buffing the entire team is great, and we're playing a ton of little creatures, so when we have 5 or 6 little fish out, that Anthem effect does some huge work. Now, despite this being a 2-drop, you usually won't want to play the Mistbinder on turn 2. You usually want to play something like a Branchwalker or a Silvergill to help fix your land or get more cards, just whatever. Or, you might want to play, spoiler alert, a Deeproot Elite, so we can just squeeze a little bit more value out of that Enter the Battlefield trigger. The Mistbinder is usually something that comes out on turn 3 or 4 when you're ready to start swinging in with the team, and this can be just a fun little surprise for your opponent. To finish our 2-drops, we have a controversial playset of Deeproot Elite. There's been a little bit of debate on whether to run this or Metallic Mimic, but from the beginning and I think the majority of the community has agreed that Deeproot Elite is the better card for this deck. That ability to choose where the counter goes is just so much better. If you want to build up your one unblockable dude to just sneak through the defenses, you can do that. If you're in a stalemate and just need to make a couple juggernauts that they can't block well, or the other way around, you're on the back foot and need to make one big blocker that discourages them from attacking it profitably, you have that option. Giving you choice just makes this way better than plopping the counter on that one creature that enters. The other thing with Mimic is that it doesn't count as a Merfolk until it's on the battlefield, meaning you can't reveal it with Silvergill Adept. It's the little things, Now we're on 3-drops. In my opinion, there are basically 4 good creatures that are 3-drops for Merfolk. Obviously, we can't play them all. We can't even play playsets of 3 of them. So we basically have to pick the best 3 and then cut them down appropriately. The 3-drop that I'm not playing is Jungleborn Pioneer. It just didn't do enough for me. That extra token it brought along just ended up being a chump blocker 90% of the time, while the Pioneer itself doesn't really end up doing anything. Yeah, it and the token have the potential to be bigger than a 2-2 and a 1-1, but that's true about any of the other 3-drops who bring along much stronger effects. I am playing 3 copies of Kamina, Tyrant of Veraska, and sometimes that doesn't even feel like enough. This card is so good. There was a lot of doubt when it first came out, but I think the community, and especially me and some other YouTubers, have agreed that this card is a bomb. If it weren't for Legendary, I'd have 4 copies and more if it was possible. Its first ability comes in huge. You can end up giving him 2 or 3 extra power in a game from all your lords, so being able to always get him in for damage is huge. His second ability is card advantage. Need I say more? Okay, maybe I do. It's card advantage that you don't have to pay for mana for. You don't even have to give up blockers for it. You can assign all your blockers, then tap them, draw a card, and they still block and deal damage. In my experience, I haven't usually needed his third ability. If I have 4 more creatures on the field, I'm pretty much always out to win anyway. That being said, in a mirror match or against something like vampires or aggro, being able to buff your whole team on end step or during combat to give your blockers an edge and just survive by that little bit, it's just so strong. Not to mention that he naturally dodges Lightning Strike, and they have to revolt a fail push to kill him, so he's got that going for him too. There's just no reason at all not to play him. Except for budget, because he's spiked to $25 overnight. Nice. Next we've got Jade Light Ranger. I was super skeptical about this card when it first came out. I just wasn't sure if it was enough to justify a 2-1 that needs doubled green. I just thought there were better 3-drops, but I decided to give it a try for a couple games, and wow. Wow. This card is so good. Again, we're only playing 22 lands, so the chance that we'll hit a non-land first is pretty decent. If it's the one that we want on top, this is a 4-3. If it isn't, then we're actually getting value from our scry, quote-unquote. Either way, it's just really good value, which, if you haven't noticed, is a bit of a theme for this deck. Our last 3-drop is, drumroll please, Kopala! There's so much hate on this card, and I get it, but I love Kopala. I know, she doesn't do anything on ETB, she's kinda easy to kill, she's double blue, blah blah blah, whatever. I don't care. She stops your opponent from interacting with your creatures, or at least makes it a huge pain. Yes, I know she's only a 2-2. I know she'll be the very first target for their removal. I get it. But that means I have to spend a ton of mana, and essentially we get to time walk them before they can even start to deal with the stuff that you're killing them with, like all the super buff unblockable guys. This is just a nice complement to everything else in our deck, and it's a great part of our synergy. There's only 2 more creatures in this deck. They're both 4-drops. Actually, they're 2 copies of the same 4-drop. Merfolk has 4 different, pretty good 4-drops. We've got Herald of Secret Streams, not bad, but ends up kind of being redundant. We have Forerunner of the Heralds. I ended up using this just to fetch Kamina like 99% of the time, and honestly, I didn't feel like I needed it that much. This deck has a lot of natural card advantage, so most of the time I could find what I needed pretty reliably. That narrows us down to 2. Seafloor Oracle and Tempest Caller. I tried these both out. They both have their pros and cons. Tempest Caller is great, way better than Oracle in certain matchups. Against tokens, vampires, aggro, really anything that can go super wide, it's a bomb. It gets immediate value when it comes out, it clears up the board, and that can sometimes be lethal. However, that's in certain matchups. Against blue-black control, blue-white approach, control-style decks which make up a pretty significant amount of the meta after the bans, Tempest Caller is super underwhelming. If you're not tapping at least 3 creatures with it, it doesn't really have a very big impact when we've got a board of 5 or 6 Merfolk. The other thing here is, a lot of our stuff is either unblockable or can be unblockable, meaning this can also end up being redundant sometimes. Plus, this card doesn't really have any use after the turn you play it. Now what about Seafloor Oracle? This can also be an all-star in some situations. The problems with it are that you don't get immediate value. If they kill it before combat damage, you've essentially time-walked yourself. However, if you can get this to stay for even 1 combat, you're potentially drawing 2, 3, sometimes even 4 cards. It is not when 1 or more Merfolk deal combat damage. It triggers on each. This is, again, super synergistic with all of our unblockable guys. This makes it okay in matchups where our opponents can go wide, since we can usually still get in for 2 cards, but it's super strong against something like Control, where we're basically trying to outrace the Scarab God. If they don't have much of a board, and we can even get in for 1 or more attacks before it inevitably gets Vraska's contempted, then that could be upward of 4 or 5 cards, which can really help us win that race. Now, what a lot of people have been arguing is that this will die too soon, and that's kind of a bad argument. Dies to removal. Of course it does. That's what removal is for. When people argue that this card is a huge target for removal, they're agreeing that this card is so powerful, has such a potential to just steal the game, that it needs to be taken care of right away. Point being, you should play the card. Because of all that insane power and utility in a variety of situations, I decided Seafloor Oracle was the right choice for this deck. Again, it's a meta call. Right now, the meta's kind of shaky. No one really knows what's going on since the bans, and there haven't really been any major tournaments, so you definitely, whatever one you're not playing, I would put it in your sideboard. But for now, I think Seafloor Oracle is the right call. This deck plays 4 non-creature spells. 4. They are all Blossoming Defense. This is just a little extra protection. We can use it to fizzle removal, buff up our creatures mid-combat to survive a block and kill a strong creature our opponents thought was safe, or just to sneak by those last couple points of damage. Some lists play Unsummon because it does similar things and lets us double up on ETB triggers, plus we can use it to bounce our opponents' stuff. I decided against this because I didn't feel like it was what I wanted a lot of the time. Usually the stuff that our opponents are trying to kill is big beaters with a bunch of 1/1s on counters on them. Blossoming Defense lets us protect our creatures without losing those counters. Unsummon also can't be used as a combat trick. If we bounce a creature, it's not going to kill their blocker or attacker. And combat damage is our only way to kill our opponent's stuff. Blue-green doesn't have access to any hard removal like the other three colors do. So Blossoming Defense just fills more roles in this deck than Unsummon does. Our land base is pretty much what you'd expect. 4 Botanical Sanctum, 4 Islands, and 6 Forests are our vanilla stuff. Pretty straightforward. Then we have 4 copies of Unclaimed Territory. It's pretty bold to go with a whole playset since it's not really useful for casting non-creatures. We don't have that problem. We're playing 34 creatures. That is so many. To finish off, we have a playset of Hash-Up Oasis, and this card is a bomb. It is a very, very strong land. We don't mind paying a life or 2 here and there if we really need to, because being able to throw 3 extra power into an attack is often game-ending. Also, one word, I've said it before a number of times in this deck because it's just so important to the synergy of this deck. Unblockable. As far as sideboard goes, it's tough to know where the meta is going to be after the bannings. If you still expect Energy to be a contender, Sorcerer's Spyglass can shut down Longtusk Cub, Bristling Hydra, Whirler Virtuoso. You'll also want Spell Pierce for those Harness Lightnings. If you think you'll see a lot of control, again, Pierce and Negate. You'll also make a pretty decent case for Shaper's Sanctuary, but it's not necessarily where you want to be on turn 1. You'll probably want a few copies of Naturalize, with Legion's Landing, Search for Skanta, Growing Rights, maybe some of the flip lands from Rivals, Godpharaoh's Gift, Cast Out, Vehicles, you get it. There are a lot of good artifacts and enchantments in Standard right now. No matter what the meta ends up looking like, you're probably going to want to get you some Naturalize. Aethersphere Harvester is also good. This deck really has no way to deal with flyers other than forcing them to keep them back as blockers. It's also great against aggro. It has a huge butt, so not many attackers can kill it, and it can gain you some life, which is super relevant when you're racing an aggro deck. Okay, that's all I got for now. I'm pretty confident in all my picks. I tried all the options, probably tried 6 or 7 different builds of the deck, and this was by far the most successful for me. And from what I've seen, I think Merfolk could be a tier 1 or at least high tier 2 strategy. If you have any suggestions, or you think I made some oversights on the main deck or sideboard, go ahead and let me know. Well, I'm super excited for this, and just to be brewing for YouTube in general. If you liked this deck, please help me out by sending me a like and subscribing for more deck techs and Magic the Gathering info. See you next time.